Hi, everyone. Life Coach Carisa here. I'm back with you today because we are going to dive into a topic that has been a huge game changer for me in my life. This is all about breaking the buffer cycle. So, we're going to be talking about buffering. Now, I know that that may sound like a technical term, but trust me, it's a concept that's probably running more of your life than you even realize. I know it was in mine. And as I always say, before you can change something, you have to become aware of it, right? So, this is going to create some much needed awareness for you around buffering behaviors so that you can determine if it's playing more of a role in your life than you would like it to. So, I'm going to be explaining what buffering is, what it could look like in your life. I'll also share some stories from my own life and what my buffers were and the negative results that were being created in my life as a result of those buffers. And then lastly, I'm going to give you some questions to ask yourself uh, so that you have a path forward, right? To think about what buffers you might be having in your life and if you want to reconsider those. Okay, so I'll be giving you a path to kind of work towards with that. So, what is buffering? Buffering was a technical term that I learned through my coaching certification that I went through. But buffering is when we use an external thing to try to change how we feel on the inside. So, I don't know, think of it like trying to fix a glitchy video by hitting pause and play again. It might work for a little bit, but it's not a long-term solution. Have you ever done that, by the way? I do that all the time and it doesn't work. Um, it never fixes the problem. So I usually need to shut it down and start over, right? So buffering could be when I feel stressed, I overeat. And when we talk about buffers, they really have a negative consequence in your life, right? So, because of this thing that you're doing, there will be a negative consequence to it. So, in my second example, if I overeat, then I'm going to become unhealthy and overweight, and I'm going to add even more issues in my life, negative issues that will cause more stress than what I even started with, right? So, buffering behavior is going to give you a negative consequence in your life. Some examples of buffering, there are really so many because in this world we have so many things that are at our disposal that can become something negative for us. So there are so many things that could fall under buffering, but I'm going to point out some of the maybe the most common. So overeating, overworking, over drinking, over Netflix watching, overspending, over Facebooking or, social media, right? You're on there so much. Maybe it's over pleasing, right? Maybe you're a people pleaser and you just do that to this extent. Maybe over worrying. Okay, so those are just a couple of things I just to point out that might be very obvious, but this may challenge your thinking a little bit, but some buffers are actually quite sneaky. On the surface, they may look positive, and so an example of that could be, let's say, over exercising, right? Let's say when you feel frustrated, you go for a run and you run so fast and so hard that you cause yourself an injury, or you deplete your body so badly that it responds by getting sick. Over exercising could be a buffer because you didn't want to feel the frustration in your life. So you turn to something else. So, see how some of these could not just be obvious, right? They're kind of hidden by something that appears positive on the surface. And again, I'm not talking about going for a run to burn off some steam. I think that's a great method for doing so. But again, if you're doing it to the extent that you would be causing yourself a negative consequence in your life by overdoing something, right, that's not in your body's or your mind's best interest, then it could also fall under buffering. So let's talk about why buffering happens in the first place. Well, everything that we do or don't do in our life is driven by how we feel. It often happens subconsciously, right? Because as I've said before, experts have said we are living our life 95% of the time kind of in our primitive lower brain. So a lot of subconscious repetitive behavior, very autopilot. And so a lot of things are happening without our like direct awareness. So, you know, things are happening within us subconsciously. And then people say things, people do things, the world does things, the government does things. We really think that those circumstances are what cause us to feel a certain way. But actually, there's something that happens first. It's typically our thought about that circumstance. And our thoughts are where we have the power, right? So it's where we can choose to pause and decide if how we're thinking about something is moving us towards our goals or farther away from them. This is not easy. And this is exactly why buffering happens, because when we don't want to feel the discomfort of our feelings, we do these things in excess. And we do it rather than something more intentional, to go after like goals for ourselves often, right? So it's things that are often done to our own detriment. They take us farther away from the goals, not closer. So a little bit about my personal story. For me, um, I had buffering kind of taking place all over my life. I didn't know about buffering, right? I was just going through life every day, one day into the next, doing what I do, doing those subconscious autopilot repetitive behaviors, and not even realizing that some of them were turning into what I would consider buffers, because I would go to work, I'd feel a lot of feelings, didn't like my feelings. I'd come home, had teenagers, uh, didn't want to feel my feelings, don't like my feelings, right? So I was looking for escapes, right? Because your primitive brain wants to experience pleasure and exert little energy and have comfort all the time. So if that's what my primitive brain is constantly seeking, then it's kind of nudging me towards anything that can give me a little hit of dopamine, right? So for me, over drinking became a big one. I had an obsession with sweet red wine, and what started out as like a casual glass of wine out with friends or on the weekends eventually turned into a nightly ritual just to unwind. And I noticed myself really thinking about it. Um, After lunchtime, I'm already thinking about that glass of wine in the evening when maybe I was feeling pressure and stress from my day. So the wine became a buffer for me, that like something to look forward to, something to make me feel better, because I don't want to feel all of this, right? Another buffer of mine was overworking. So I would stay late at the office and then I would come home and I would dive right back in on my laptop because, hey, why stop now, right? I mean, it's like there's always more to do. And I didn't like the feeling of not being caught up. So I was just caught in this overworking cycle. And it would actually make me feel productive and busy when I was in it, but there were such negative consequences to that, right? Like I'm not present with my family, I'm not enjoying my family, I'm not taking time to let my even mind and body rest. Um, and let's not forget overspending. That was one of mine too. There's nothing like a little retail therapy to chase away the blues, right? So there would be times when I would be on my way home from work, had a bad day, and I would want to go buy something, maybe an article of clothing, right? And then I would feel really guilty afterwards because it wasn't on the plan. I didn't necessarily need it. And I was just looking for something to try to make me feel better. Um, I also was someone who could waste time on social media, so I could definitely overdo that. I could also over worry about anything and everything. And so again, I hope you're getting the sense of what this is about, right? It's when you don't want to feel a feeling, because feelings are vibrations in our body, and some of them we just automatically do not want to process and feel. Overwhelm, stress, frustration, anger, sadness, regret, shame, guilt, like all those feelings, they don't feel so great in our body, and we're kind of trained to not want to feel them. One of the things I teach in coaching is to teach you how to feel your feelings so that we don't need to turn to these buffers. So here's the thing, we all do it, right? So whether it's hitting up the snack cabinet when we're stressed or we binge watch Netflix instead of dealing with our own feelings, buffering is your brain's way of avoiding discomfort. So who can blame us? I mean, society's always telling us that we should be happy and carefree all the time. And our caveman brains are very wired to seek pleasure and pain. So, or to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So when life gets tough, buffering feels like the path of least resistance, right? Sometimes buffering can feel like you're doing something very kind for yourself. But again, when it has that net negative consequence, I'm going to gain weight because I'm overeating. I'm going to not be able to sleep well tonight, and my liver is not going to be healthy. And I'm avoiding my family because I'm over drinking, or I'm overworking and I feel very productive, and yet I am not spending that quality time with my family members. I'm not giving my body a break, right? So there's that net negative consequence that's going to come as a result of this buffering behavior that you are participating in. So I hope that explains a little bit about what buffering is and how you can start to recognize it in your life. And then I want to give you some ideas. Okay, what's the solution, right? So again, it starts with awareness. Recognizing your buffering habits is the first step to breaking free from them. Once you know what your go-to buffers are, and you can recognize the negatives that are associated with those buffers, you can then start to tackle them head on. And trust me, it is so worth it. When you can ditch the buffers and start dealing with your feelings head on, you will be amazed at how much lighter you feel. So I want you to start out by asking yourself, what negative emotions do you tend to feel on a regular basis? This is where I started, right? So I recognized that mine were anxiety and overwhelm, worry, and guilt. And then I named what my buffers tended to be. Mine were over drinking, overworking, and overspending. Those were probably my top three. And so, since awareness is the first step to changing any behavior, when you spend time naming them and maybe even writing them down in a journal, that is going to help build that awareness, right? And then include in that, write down what the downsides are for your buffers. So, for example, when I overdrink, I gain weight, I hurt my liver, I disrupt my sleep, and I don't feel my best, right? When I overwork, I'm not present for my family, I lack quality sleep, and I am not ready to kind of take on the next day. And when I overspend, I don't have the money in the bank to do the things that I planned on or that I truly want to do, right? So that is how you can start to recognize the buffer and then associate what the negative is with that buffer. Okay. It's crucial. You got to have both of those things. Okay. And I think I just asked you to be very honest with yourself. We all want to hide behind those unflattering things in our life, but get very honest with yourself and let those two components just be able to flow out of you, what your buffers are and what the negative consequences that you're getting in your life because of it. And then once you have that idea of what your buffers are and what you're trying to avoid, then you can try to begin to tackle them, right? And so I'm going to give you 4 steps for that. Step one is to explore and recognize the feeling is coming from your thinking. Okay. So look at what that buffer is, look at what it's creating in your life, and then ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to avoid, right? What is the thought or the circumstance that's going on in my brain that is creating this feeling in me that's making me want to avoid it. Okay. So explore. And then step two is to acknowledge that feeling discomfort doesn't mean that something has gone wrong. We are not supposed to be happy all the time, okay? We need the contrast of positive and negative emotions to really be able to fully experience life. You don't want to be happy when something terrible happens in your life. We are meant to feel both the good and bad emotions. So acknowledge that just because I'm feeling discomfort right now doesn't mean that anything has really gone wrong that I need to fix, okay? It's supposed to be here, and then you can let it flow through you, okay? So, step three, feel it, breathe into it, welcome it, and tell the negative emotion that you see it. Just like a bully, stand up to it and then it goes away, right? It lessens. And step four, repeat that process for every negative emotion that you have, right? So, when I was feeling overly stressed at work and then having to come home and be engaged in my household, and that was just way too much for me, I didn't want to feel that discomfort, right? The feelings of overwhelm and stress and inadequacy of not being a good enough mom, right? So because I didn't want to feel that, and I wasn't exploring why this is happening and acknowledging it in me and trying to process it and work through it, I would then look for something to make me feel better, which was wine, right? And so then that once that habit becomes well worn in your brain, it's like what your brain thinks that you need every day, right? Because your brain really doesn't know when something's not in your best interest. It will repeat the behaviors even if it's not really good for you, okay? So, I encourage you to grab a journal, start digging deep. Your future self is going to thank you for it, just like mine is. I know it has thanked me over and over and over again. It has said, "Thank you, Carissa, for shedding your unhealthy buffers. We are so much better for it." I stopped drinking cold turkey in 2021. I reduced my desire for it. If I have an occasional drink, I don't have the heightened sense of wanting to fall back into that repetitive cycle. It's something that I just frankly don't care about anymore in my life. It does not play a big part of it. And that was done by systematically noticing what my buffers are, why I was doing them, and what negative results I was getting in my life because of it. And through that process, I have been able to eliminate that from my life. I've been able to eliminate the overworking um, due to some major life changes that I made in my transformation of choosing a different career. But I could still be prone to that overworking, right? So, because I recognized the downside of what overworking was causing in my life, and I eliminated a lot of the um, desire to get away from negative feelings, I no longer feel like I need to do that to not feel something. Okay. And then overspending, I've pretty much eliminated because I recognize I was only doing that to try to feel better once again about my life. And that was one of my outlets to do that. So it has just been such a freeing and empowering process for me. And I would love to show you how to do this. This is an example of the work that I do when I work one on one with individuals to help them seek the life that they really would want for themselves, not just what the autopilot life, the subconscious, the primitive brain is giving you in your life, right? So that's pretty much it for today. And if you found this helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. And as always, if you have any questions or topics you would like for me to cover, I would love it if you would drop them in the comments. And if you're curious about my work, visit my website at lifecoachingwithcarissa.com. You will find available times there for complimentary sessions where we can address any questions you may have, fears or apprehensions that you may have about working with me as your one on one transformational coach. And again, there is so much available to you if you learn some new tools and put them in your toolbox and figured out how to once and for all overcome these things that you're just in a repetitive cycle with that keep you feeling down. And that's my goal for you is that you could break free from the chains of some of those things that are running your life, right? And take your control back because it's totally possible. And I would love to show you how. So, all right, everyone, have a great day, and I will see you in a couple weeks.